How long is it? You've been shuffled out of my end of the day. Maybe somebody tried to tell you something.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I'm closer to the door, which
Closer to the security. Start to shoot. I'm out of here first.
That's like emergency exit on an airplane.
You better be moving.
You better be quick.
My neighbor and I share a driveway. Yeah, there'll be a pile behind me.
Keep moving, don't look back.
Somebody gotta be a hero.
Jason,
Said you don't have to outrun it. I told my daughter,
Subjects, all of them.
We got everyone here that we're expecting.
There was a motion.
Mr. Hansel from has
Bill's here.
You know, he talks.
So we're ready to go?
All
right. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Town of Abingdon Planning Commission. Mr. Boswell, if you give us roll call for attendance purposes, please.
Okay, Mr. Hansel?
Here.
Mr. Wilson?
Here.
Dr. White?
Here.
Mr. Schuman?
Here.
Mr. Sullivan?
Here.
Mr. Austin?
I am here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much, sir. Next on our agenda tonight is approval of minutes of the June 25th, 2018 meeting. You have those attached, I believe, to your agenda. If everyone's had an opportunity to review those, are there any additions or corrections to those?
I have a couple
Yes, sir.
corrections. On page 3, second paragraph, it says, the last sentence says, will be aesthetically pleasing from the city's entrance corridor. Of course, we're a town. I don't know if that's literally what was said, but it's an important distinction in Virginia, that it's a town, not a city. And then 2 paragraphs down from that where it says the grade of the existing parking spaces is not 2% sloped as zoned. It should just be, it's not 2% sloped as required by ADA. And then the last sentence, it says, board is requesting that BFO Brady's landscape the property with grass, medians, trees, shrubs, etc. We said per the entrance corridor overlay. I think that should be added.
All right. Is there any discussion on the proposed modifications to these minutes?
I have one as well, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir, please.
It's just that one word on page 8. It says Mr. Humphreys also handle, it should be handed out, count pins, just change that word from whatever that word is to hand it.
Actually hand out pins, not pens.
No, that's right, it is pins.
Now, where is that, Mr. Schuman?
Page 8, last sentence.
Okay.
It's handed and pins.
Oh, I got you.
Again, that's minor, but.
Okay. All right. All right. Any other proposed modifications? Any discussion on those modifications? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as modified.
So moved.
Second to that? All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Please show me as abstaining. I was not present at that meeting. Mr. Schuman filled my shoes and did an admirable job, I understand. All right, let's move on. Next on our agenda tonight is a certificate of appropriateness, application for certificate of appropriateness. Beef O'Brady's 21st Century Cinema LLC, Abingdon, Virginia owner, expansion of the Cinemal's existing tenant space to accommodate a Beef O'Brady's franchise restaurant. 3 separate expansions. One will require 6 existing accessible parking spaces to be relocated. One will leave an 11 by 4 inch of sidewalk depth in front of the public entrance to the restaurant. One will be in an existing service area to the rear of the building and will not be visible from the entrance corridor. The Cinemal's existing canopy will be shortened by 34 feet 6 inches in length. This property is located 721 East Main Street in Abingdon, currently zoned B2, tax map number 007-1-1. Is there someone here to speak in regards to this? And I do know that it was on last month's agenda. Yes, sir. Please state your name and business address so we'll have it for minutes.
Steve Weston, 721 East Main Street, Abingdon, Virginia. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. I was here last time, and I know that there were several items or several areas that were being discussed. So I'm here to try to address all those areas, and I have some people that I'd like to help me with that, who have more knowledge than I do about a few of these topics, and then I have some knowledge that I'd like to talk about a couple of them. The first one I wanted to talk about was that there was a concern about traffic, particularly making a left turn out of the Cinemal. As you know, the Cinemal's been in business now for over 20 years, so we have a lot of history on that. And to help us with the historical perspective, I'd like to ask Lieutenant John Holbrook to address the commission.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Lieutenant Holbrook with the Police Department. Mr. Weston had contacted me concerning our traffic data, and we keep pretty extensive traffic data at the Police Department. In fact, I'm pretty proud of it. We do a report on any traffic crash, no matter if it's considered reportable by the state or non-reportable. And that kind of gives us a broad overview of what's going on within the town as far as traffic. And he wanted me to narrow it down to his entryway into the Cinemal there on East Main Street, and I was able to do so. And found that we had 3 traffic crashes since 2004, which is pretty significant as a good result. Of those 3, 2 involved motor vehicles and 1 involved a pedestrian. The pedestrian was crossing the street from the Cinemal area, the sidewalk in front of the Cinemal on the street, and made it to almost the last lane before being struck by the car. The other 2 vehicles were pulling out of the Cinemal parking lot, making a left. The crashes occurred in 2004, 2005, and 2007, and we haven't had one since 2007, which is a success on the police department side, not to have a crash since 2007 in that area. Because I'm kind of a data nerd, I went back and pulled the VDOT traffic counts for 2017, which always gives you a good idea of how much traffic. And for that area, Main Street, from Tanner Street to Thompson Drive, they have an average daily count of 13,000 vehicles, which is a pretty significant amount of vehicles going to Main Street with only 3 crashes since 2004. Now, we'll throw them a disclaimer out there. I could be off by about 1 crash because of the way that we've changed the reporting system since 2004 to present. But this is a really pretty accurate estimate of the crashes that occurred. And y'all have any questions for me?
I do, because I dig in this field too. How many of those crashes were VDOT reportable?
I did not.
Other than the fatality?
I did not look at the damage on the crashes. I just looked and saw that there was a crash and the diagram of the crash, and then I moved on.
Okay.
So it could be both, it could be neither.
But the last one was 2007.
The last one was 2007.
So was the fatality the pedestrian?
Yes.
2004. Right.
All right, anyone have any questions of Lieutenant Holbrook?
One follow-up. Based upon the number of cars a day and the businesses that are, the business that the Cinemal does, as a traffic enforcement officer, does a left turn present a problem at that entrance?
No. pretty easily say no. At that low of a rate compared to the other intersections we have in town, that probably should be left alone.
Off the top of your head, and this is unfair, I'm throwing this at you, did you have a comparable intersection that you may have looked at? Where business is located?
I did look across the street to VDOT while I was looking, which is, you know, right across the street. And they've had a crash since then, making a left out of VDOT, so. But other than that, that's the only one I really looked at. And I threw that out of the data because it had relation to the VDOT parking lot, not the cinema parking lot.
Well, you have that center lane that's helpful to people making a turn to
Yes.
the left coming.
Yes, and it is helpful.
Yes.
Any further questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Another item that was brought up was landscaping. This is kind of technical because the Beef O'Brady's, which is a franchise operation, will actually be a tenant in the building, an inline tenant similar to a strip shopping center. They have a piece of the total overall square footage of approximately 10% of the total square footage of the footprint of the buildings there. So while we didn't provide any more landscaping, obviously we landscaped when we were built in 1997 and 98. We have some trees that we planted back then that are now pretty much obscure the building from the street, the ones that are very healthy. So it's not like we don't have any, but we want to be a good neighbor here in town, obviously, and we thought that it would be appropriate for the new operation coming in to contribute some additional landscaping to what we already have based upon how many parking spaces they're going to impact based upon the amount of square footage on the total property of the 7 acres that are there. So that's the way that we've approached it, and our architect from Burwell is here tonight, and we'd like him to go into the details of that for you. This is Michael Haslam from Burwell.
Thank you, Steve. Hello again. I'm hoping you all have the revised site plan as part of your materials. There's a couple things that we've addressed on that, and since I've been asked to talk specifically about the landscaping, I'll just focus on that at this point. You'll notice that there are 6 trees now being shown in the parking lot in 2 rows of 3, stretching from the entrance to Beef O'Brady's out to Main Street. And that number comes from a reading of the ordinance that requires a tree for every 5 required spaces. And when we did our analysis of the seating area of this building and how that translates to required spaces also per the ordinance, that calculation yields a number of 30 spaces that would be representative of the load that the restaurant development is placing on this parking lot. So with 1 tree for every 5 spaces, at the scale of the development we're talking about, which is just the restaurant, we're looking at 6 trees for a 30 space allocation to the restaurant load. And there you can see we've stacked them up right in front of the restaurant there, which sort of also serves the purpose of maybe making the suggestion that that's a designated parking area for the restaurant, for those who choose to view it as such. But I think in practice, people are going to park where they're going to park here, probably. So that's where we're coming at that from, and the image of a precedent of how this kind of approach to planting in a parking lot that was included from a Virginia Tech parking lot around Lane Stadium shows how we plan to implement planter without losing any additional parking spaces by creating that diamond at the corner of intersection of 4 existing parking spaces in 2 locations. The remaining 4 trees will be planted in areas that are already curb space, so we're not losing parking spaces in those locations either. Does the commission have any questions for me on that?
So you're gonna end up with 6 additional trees, is that what you're saying?
6 trees additional to what's currently in place. Yeah, so that's not a complete count of what's on the site, but that's what we plan to
That
add.
would be what you add.
Yes.
All right, does anyone have any additional questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I can do that.
I'd also like, if it's okay with you, I'd like Michael to address the relocation of the handicapped parking spaces. That was an issue that was raised last time too.
So that's the other thing, on the same site plan, I would refer your attention to the red box where it says 8 relocated handicap parking spaces. In the previous plan that we had submitted, we had only relocated 6 of those spaces and had done so, sort of took the opposite approach of what we're now proposing to do, where we had taken the 6 spaces that had been occupying a space where the proposed building is going to cause them to have to move, and we had been relocating them in an area in front of the cinema where there were another 2 existing spaces. And upon further study of the parking lot, we found that the grade there is not particularly friendly to the accessible spaces. So had somebody go out and measure the grades where they're currently being shown on the plan on the edge of the parking lot bordering the Roses property. We're lining up now all 8 handicap parking spaces there. So we're replacing the 6 that need to be moved because of the building footprint, but we're also taking the 2 that are existing in front of the cinema and adding that to that gang of 8 spaces over there, where all the grades are going to cooperate with us the way we want them to. We've provided a accessible means of egress from those spaces to the sidewalk where both entrances to the cinema and the restaurant would take place. And that was another issue that I think the commission had mentioned they definitely wanted us to address before this meeting. So if there's any other comments or statements I can make about that to help clarify, happy to do so at this time.
Any questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
There are, well, the last 2 are areas where we are asking the board to use its power and discretion to consider granting us an exception, so to speak. The first one concerns signage. The Beef O'Brady sign that we proposed, I wanted the commission to know that this isn't a size sign that we came up with internally. This is the size of sign that Beef O'Brady's uses at its other 200 locations in most of the states in the United States. So it was pretty much stock art that we received from them. Now, on a unit such as ours, which is one of their larger units, maybe the largest that they have, it's also, where it's being constructed is an end cap unit. So it lends itself to signage, in our case, here in town, where we would be facing the audience coming in over the bridge, obviously coming from the east. So we have an east exposure and we have a south exposure. And the other Beef O'Brady's restaurants, in that they have a sign on both sides of that end cap facing in two different directions. In addition, on some of them, they also have a sign at the street. We know that the board and the town is sensitive to signage, particularly on East Main Street coming in from 19. So instead of coming in here and asking for 3 signs or even 2 signs, we decided strategically, let's get it down to the one that would be the most important, which would be the one near the entrance, on the entrance side of the building facing Main Street. Let's not come in and try and have 2 signs, one facing in the side direction and nothing on the street. Obviously, we do have a small street sign out there that has the name of the cinema on it. We're not planning any signage on the street for the Beef O'Brady's. And the signage that exists, and I don't know whether it exists because your ordinance doesn't specifically speak to signs that are placed on the building as opposed to hanging from the building. Because the signs that our neighbors have are considerably larger than the ones that we proposed. And I did bring some photographs, which I'll give to you to distribute. There's one for everybody. I think the most recent example is actually the Food Country, which is very close to us, on East Main Street. They have food on one side and country on the other side, and the letters practically take up the whole frontage of the building. So, I mean, obviously I don't know whether that was something that they approached you and asked for an exception on that, or whether they just did it on the theory that it doesn't fall under the sign ordinance. But we're not trying to do something here that we're not telling you about. We're telling you that we would like to have this size sign, and the reason we would like to have it is so that it's clearly visible from East Main Street, number one. Number two, we don't have any other signage on the building, and we have a very large building. And we've never had any signage on the building. The only sign that we ever had on the building was the sign in which we honored the soldiers, and that was up there for many years. And it was temporary, and then we took it down. So we don't have any other sign identifying this as a movie theater, as a cinema on the building. This signage would be the only signage on the building itself, and it is obviously centered in the section of the Beef O'Brady's operation. As you can see from the photographs, there are other stores that are nearby us that have larger signs than we're proposing. You know, it's not that we are saying that it's not fair. They have a big sign, why can't we have a big sign? That's not what we're saying here. We're saying we think that the sign we've asked for is appropriate for the size of the building that it's on and for the distance from Main Street, so that people can find a new business in town. So that's, and the fact that we didn't ask for 2 or 3 signs. And we're representing to you that we're not going to be putting any other signs on the building, even if your ordinance doesn't cover it, because we think that this sign is enough. Any questions on the signage?
As a novice, I just want to be clear. I've tried to read the overlay. I've tried to read the sign portions, and I'm very confused. But I'm going to ask our interim planning director for clarification. Can you show me in our code where we regulate signage affixed to buildings?
No.
Why is
It's
that?
not specifically addressed.
We only regulate signage on the street front.
For freestanding projecting sign, yes. Projecting sign and a wall mounted sign are 2 separate signs.
Yeah, I went through that sign ordinance in detail, and it doesn't address anything. It's only if it sticks more than 15 inches
More than
off the
15
building.
inches. Yes, sir.
So we don't have, I guess what I'm asking is we really don't have a dog in this hunt. do we?
That's correct.
I just hate to be
Well, I
playing.
think that, yeah, I think what was raised last month, and I think the reason it's back before us, was really the confusion of what you're raising. I felt, last time that, I didn't have a problem with the sign that was presented, but I wasn't sure what the ordinance was, and, I wanted to be sure what the discussion was, because one point I would make, and I agree with Mr. Weston, the worst thing you can do with a sign is have a sign too small so that people can't see it. All that does is create a traffic problem, people slowing down trying to find a building that they can't see. There's nothing good about that. But I think there was some confusion last time about what the ordinance actually showed.
Well, I left here confused, and I went and I tried, and I'm not the smartest guy, I'll say that up front, and I dug through that ordinance, and I finally came downstairs and said, can you tell me where this is? And he goes, no, I can't, because we don't have it. So I just want to be clear.
I think that's something we probably needs, we don't need to get into it tonight, but needs to be given to town council to decide what to do, because if you meet the street signage and then you put up this monster on the building, what have you done? You've defeated the whole purpose of the street sign.
And I agree with Mr. Schuman that because of the distance that the cinema property sits back from the street, I mean, you are gonna have a substantial sign lettering on the building to make it visible. If not, Lieutenant Holbrook and the police department will be standing out there working rear end collisions all day. So I just wanted to be clear, and I wasn't the only one that was lost, so I feel better. So, thank you.
But I do agree with Dr. White. I think that's something that needs to be looked at, because again, it's not something we would be concerned with this particular, situation, but I agree with him. You could have a different situation that would be, not so great.
Well, one of the things I'm finding is we've got quite a few codes along this line that need to be revisited.
Mr. Weston, I'm just curious, and it's a business decision, really none of my business, but why do you not want a sign or have a sign down on Main Street, both for the cinema hall and for this new restaurant you're proposing?
Well, I mean, we do have a sign for the cinema on Main Street.
Right, well, no, but, okay.
But the ordinance that covers that sign would require that the Beef O'Brady sign be very small, particularly because we already have a sign there that has a cinema.
Because of the signage constraints?
Yes,
that's why
because of
you're
the
not
signage
proposing.
constraint, it's very small, people would probably pass it by, not notice it, or by the time they saw it, they already passed the entrance if they're coming over the bridge. So for the same reason, I mean, we've been real fortunate with traffic flow, and we don't want to mess with that.
It's my understanding, there would be nothing that would preclude you from putting the exact same sign on the other side of the building.
I realize, I hear you, and I appreciate that. It wasn't our plan to do that. I don't think we're going to need to do that. I mean, if we did, we'd have to address that and come back.
The typical
Maybe by then
Beef
you'll have your
O'Brady's,
ordinance
The
amended.
side sign just says like beefs or something. It's
Yeah.
not like the full sign like this. It's like an abbreviated thing usually.
Thank you all for the clarification, I appreciate it.
The last thing I wanted to address was parking. And this is something that I think I have the experience to speak about, even though I'm not a traffic engineer or parking expert. But I know that building. And I know how many cars we park, and I know when we're having a good day and we're having a lousy day. Now, when we first opened, of course, those were the days of old plastic film. And when we opened, when we showed Titanic as one of our opening movies, we could only show it 4 times a day, 1, 4, 7, and 10. And that's because we had one copy of the film and we put it on one projector. As popular as it was, one of the biggest movies of all time, we can only get 4 showings a day. Well, the crowds are all coming to those 4 showings, and now at 7 o'clock, you got a parking mess, you got a concession stand mess, and you got unhappy patrons because they can't get a ticket. But now, that was 20 years ago. Since 2012, We're now in the digital age. So when we have a big movie now, like if Titanic opened tomorrow, we wouldn't have 4 shows. We would have 13. The first one would be at 11 o'clock in the morning. It would show every hour on the hour until 11 p.m. So they have 13 shows. And that's no exaggeration, because that's exactly what we do whenever we open a big movie. It doesn't have to be Star Wars. I mean, it can be, there's a lot of big movies nowadays. So that's what we do. We show it every hour on the hour if it merits that kind of a popularity. Now, what does that do? Well, that spreads out the audience. You don't have all these people coming for 7 or 7:30 show and the parking lot is clogged up and people can't find a space. Because those people that like that 7 o'clock show time, they're gonna come at 6, they're gonna come at 7, they're gonna come at 8, some are gonna come at 5, some are gonna come at 9, and it spreads it out, which helps us operationally tremendously inside of the concession stand, because we don't have the long lines where people get angry because they have to wait too long to buy their concession items. So, but the point is that when the ordinance was written, and when all these guidelines were established, was not in the digital days. It was in the film days. In the film days, they developed, let's have 1 parking space per 4 seats. That doesn't apply anymore at all for the reasons that, primarily for the reasons I just said. That just doesn't apply anymore when you have 13 shows. That you need 1 parking space for each 4 seats. Because those 4 seats are now not all occupied at the prime time altogether. So we felt this impact. We had more of a parking problem when we opened in 1998 than we have now. Even though then we only had 4 screens. Now we have 12, and we don't have the impact. I mean, if you could pull up the map of our parking spaces. Well, those spaces up there, never occupied. This lot we built down here, never occupied. These here, almost never. And same thing over here, and these never. I mean, if you count all those up, we have a lot of extra parking spaces. And I mean, if you really think about it, you can understand why, because we just don't need to have that many people park at once, because they have so many options as to when to come there. And once a show sells out nowadays, you buy tickets online, it's not like you go there and you park and you walk in and you find out that, oh, I can't see my movie now. You don't go because you can't get your ticket, or you buy your ticket to the 8 o'clock show instead of the 7 o'clock show. So we have a lot of extra parking. And the extra parking obviously is available for the restaurant. Keep in mind that when we opened in 1998, we had a restaurant, a full-scale sports bar restaurant, in the same space where we're proposing to put a restaurant now, even though we're proposing to expand it. And the same 3,000 square feet was occupied by Hudson's Hollywood Grill, which was the name of the sports restaurant that we opened in 1998, which didn't work out, and we closed it. But it was there, it operated, and we didn't have an issue with parking. So we do have a lot of extra parking, and I want the board to know that whatever you do tonight, and let's assume that you accept these points and you allow us to move forward without trying to find more parking spaces. If this becomes a problem in the future, whether it's the intersection or it's the parking, we will address it. We're not going to hang our hat on, well, we came to the commission, they approved it. That's not the way we've ever done business, and that's not the way we want to continue. If there's a problem, we have to address it, both as a good neighbor and because we're in business here. We can't be in business with problems. And our anticipation is that this restaurant is going to use more than 30 parking spaces. That is our anticipation. I don't know if you've ever been in the Beef O'Brady's. There are 2 of them in the Tri-Cities. This is not like that. It does have the same food, but the inside is completely different. The inside of this restaurant is going to be something that nobody's ever seen before. In this small of a space, we have 39 video feeds feeding 78 TVs, 65 inches each. We have more sports art in here than you'll find in the Hall of Fame. I mean, actually, this is going to be a Hall of Fame for every sport that you can imagine, from football being the most popular, all the way down to checkers. Whatever you can think of as your sport, you're going to be able to walk in there and you're going to see the most famous, the most memorable events and people captured in very large professional photographs that are everywhere. I was joking today with our managing partner, Cindy, that there's going to be so much to look at in this place that you really don't need to go there to eat. You just get a glass of water and look. So the point is, we expect that we're going to really use these parking spaces that we're sitting around on the perimeter. All the ones that are never used, of course, are the ones that are furthest from the front doors, of course. Well, okay, so now maybe they're going to be used in the peak times of the restaurant. The peak time of the restaurant obviously does seem to coincide with the peak times of the movie theater in terms of Friday night, Saturday night. And maybe not so much Saturday afternoon, but the Friday night and Saturday night, that's always crunch time. So we expect that we're going to have to monitor this, and if parking becomes a problem, we're going to have to address it. And if ingress and egress becomes a problem, we will address it. We're not going to ignore it because we were allowed to proceed. So I just wanted to chime in on that.
What options do you have available, or would you have available to address the parking?
If we had to, we would be looking for parking up at Rose's. Now, we had this when we first opened. We actually parked overflow parking up there, and we built steps so that the customers could walk up and down. Over a period of time, the kids took the steps apart and they used it for crazy stuff. But there's a lot of, obviously, we know, for better or for worse, there's a lot of extra parking up in the Rose's parking lot. It's not a Walmart up there. So we would be trying to go in that direction, or we would be trying to perhaps reconfigure a little bit of what we have on the right side to enable more parking over there, or at least to encourage more parking over there. You know, sometimes people would park up at Rose's even though there was still spaces around our building. It's just that, you know, they don't see them because they're not directed to them or they're not as well lit. So there were spaces that never got used that could have been used, and people were parking up at Rose's. But that was 20 years ago. Now, if we have this problem again, that would obviously be the first place to go because there's a surplus of parking up there. And I'm sure Mr. Frizzell, for the right price, would lease us some parking.
Anyone else have questions?
Thank you very much.
Mr. Weston. Mr. Boswell, perhaps it's here, I've overlooked it, but to what extent is a waiver necessary for the parking requirements? I understand that with the number, I had it up here a moment ago.
I think the code addresses and says that it's really up to the planning commission whether it's in the best interest of the town.
Okay.
No specifications, just.
No specific number that.
No, sir.
Okay.
And we certainly don't want to make it meet the ordinance. You'd have to get another football field.
Yes, sir.
For parking, which would be far worse looking than.
Yeah.
There was a book written in the mid-1990s called Better Not Bigger. In many municipalities, including Abingdon, parking made them tear down historic houses, historic structures for parking. And Abingdon fell into one of the greatest Victorian homes sat next to the Fields Pen House, and it had to be destroyed so that APCO could get parking for its building. And, you know, I agree completely with Mr. Weston. I don't think there's, I've driven by there and I've never seen that lot completely filled, fortunately or unfortunately. And I don't think it'd be an issue at all.
Well, I think particularly, you know, the additional landscaping is what we wanted. in terms of the additional trees. He has an option for overflow parking, which has been utilized in the past. So I don't see a problem.
Is that in the form of a motion?
Well, I guess the question is, we've got 2 or 3 things to deal with, and should we have separate motions? You know, in other words, we've got the parking to deal with, we've got the sign to deal with. I don't know that we actually have the building itself. I don't know if there's anything we have to do with that.
I don't know that you have the sign to deal with.
Do what?
I don't know that you have the sign to deal with.
Okay, in other words, what we decided in the discussion is there isn't any reason to deal with the sign.
Yeah, I think the only separate motion that you would make would be the waiver of the parking. I think you make one motion for the certificate of appropriateness, allow them to continue, then if that passes, I think you make a motion for the waiver on the parking restriction. That's just an opinion. I did not sleep in the Holiday Inn Express either.
I'll make a motion
That's correct.
that we grant the certificate of appropriateness.
Second to that motion?
I'll second.
All right, Mr. Anderson is second. Any additional discussion on the motion that's been made and seconded? If not, please, sir, we'll have a roll call vote for that, please.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Dr. White?
Uh,
Mr. Wilson? Mr. Schuman?
Aye.
Mr. Sullivan?
Aye.
Mr. Austin?
Aye. All right, that motion has passed. Now, is there a motion in regards to the waiver on the parking requirements?
I'll make,
Well, okay.
go ahead.
Like I said, I move that we accept a waiver on the parking requirements based on the presentation by Mr. Weston.
I'll second.
All right, motion made and seconded. Additional discussion in regards to that? All right, if not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed likewise. That motion carried unanimously. All right, any
Can I say
additional?
one quick thing?
Yes, please.
I just want to thank you all for thoroughly addressing what came up last month. That was very nice. Thank you.
I also want to thank you for opening a new business in town. That several weeks ago, I drove from the Center Mall down to what was once Southern States. And I counted over 40 vacant buildings or vacant office spaces. And this town needs to really address businesses opening in this town. There's nothing but smaller businesses opening, and I want to thank Mr. Weston for putting money into it and opening another new business, and hopefully it sparks some interest in other people opening businesses also.
Can I add a point, and as an observation from an outsider who's stepping in, at least temporarily? You know, my first couple of meetings, I was just sort of sitting back trying to take this all in, and there seems to be a lack of communication, and I don't know if it's between the commission and the planning department, but it seems like, well, when he showed up last month, I mean, it was like, he wasn't prepared to talk about any of the questions that the board had. And I think somehow if we could get those questions back to the planning department ahead of time, before his appearance, we would have probably only had one show. We would have done this one time. And I don't know what the breakdown is. And in the managerial role, I'd be interested in talking to the commission and figuring out how we can expedite this process, how we can streamline this a little more. Because you got a business owner who's trying to invest money in our community, and we put him off for 30 days. And
I think last month was unusual, really, I do. The other people were here, that certainly is not the norm, in my experience.
Okay. I just want to make sure that if we
Yeah, I
have
mean, it
communication
was,
breakdown.
Typically, people are not put off 30 days unless like they don't show up or something, if there's nobody. But other than that, most work are worked out.
I want to make sure, as his supervisor, I want to make sure that we're giving him all the tools to let him get you all the answers you need. And so we have folks like this who don't have to come back. I just want to make sure that we're as streamlined as possible. If there's a breakdown somewhere on the government side, between the commission and the government, I'd appreciate a phone call. Because I want this to be as streamlined as possible. I think everybody here has a vested interest, including Mr. Weston, in seeing our community thrive and survive. And, as well as Dr. White pointed out, we got a lot of vacant storefronts. And, we should be making this as business friendly as possible. And so I just want to make sure that we're doing everything we can from the government side to do that, to make sure you all have what you need to make an informed decision.
I would agree with Mr. Shimon's observation that it is unusual that occurs. But I also think that oftentimes if there is an unusual issue or a multiple faceted type issue, that many times us getting together as a planning commission and listening to the initial presentation is helpful to us to formulate those questions. And it perhaps is difficult for us to formulate those questions until such time as we've been together like that. So it may not be a total waste, even though I understand economically it can make a difference.
And I just want to make sure that we're, from the government side, doing everything
Sure.
we can to arm both the planning commission and our citizens with proper information.
Absolutely.
I think one thing last time, the confusion about what the ordinance was over the sign, I think was a sticking point. I frankly, I frankly think probably could have dealt with that. I do think it was important that the issue that Scott raised about the parking, particularly the handicap parking, some of that stuff was important. It needs to be done right. But I do think that the issue with what the ordinance allows, I can tell, I did not know. And I think that was one of the reasons for the delay.
I didn't want to start a whole discussion, but I just want to make sure we're doing what we can to expedite the process and make sure that everybody's armed with what they need to go forward. Thank you all for indulging me.
Thank you, Jim. All right, next on our agenda tonight is an application for certificate of appropriateness. First Community Bank, 29 College Drive, Bluefield, Virginia. Owner, exterior improvements, change the windows and the facade of the existing bank building located at 271 West Main Street, Abingdon, currently zoned B3, tax map number 011-1-84. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name's Jim Bundy. Sorry, I have Bell's palsy, so I have a little trouble. P's and F's and some other words, but apologize for not being here last month at the meeting. There was a little confusion over who was supposed to be here anyway, so nobody was here. We're kind of doing the minimum, replacing existing windows with new windows. They are within a few inches of the size of the original windows, but they are just a hair larger. And we left changing the front door just a little bit with a drive-it that'll look like granite, and quite a change on the back. Most people use the back door because that's where the parking lot is. And so we're building a nice entrance in the back. Other than that, we're getting rid of part of the drive-through and increasing the roof so that it'll shade the ATM better. And there's the site plan. We're adding some signage. That's what I brought today, but it's all on that drawing too, to control the traffic flow around the building a little bit, make it one way coming in on the east side and around the building through the drive-through, or you can go out into the alley, or you can go out into Main Street, park in the back and go in the back of the building, or park on the west side and enter the building. And we've got signs to direct traffic. No entrance on the front, and do not enter signs on the front, and enter on the east side of the building, and exit and enter on the rear at the alley. And we've landscaped the north side or the alley side of the parking lot to cut down that large, the entryway across there goes across the whole lot, which, that's worked for, I don't know how long it's been there, since the Farmers Exchange Bank. So.
I want to ask you a question about the windows, because ex-member Humphreys certainly want to ask about
Yes.
the lights. I think And you'll have at the bottom as well as the top?
We
Notice
can
you
look
got
at
them
the
at the
drawing.
top.
We've done so many different kind of windows there, I can't answer that, but I
Drawing
think
shows
they're.
you do.
Huh?
Drawing shows that you have panes or lights
In the top.
and bottom. Didn't I see it roll by?
The drawing last month had them in the top of the window and not the bottom, I think was what
Roll
Mr.
down.
Humphrey, right there. Go
Wait a
back,
minute.
right there, see how the bottom
Yeah.
doesn't
So
show the
it'll
bottom?
roll up to the top then, I think.
That's what the ones facing Main Street, he was like, well, these are great, but for some reason he didn't like those, I'm not sure what. the-
Well,
That's
it's
a
all
little
disappointing, the federal buildings.
distorted, too.
Paints upper and lower. I think, didn't I see it earlier? Or is it just on the
Yep.
front around the windows there? Is that the first one?
Yes.
Oh, no, there it is.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an early drawing, just for the bank, a presentation drawing. But to be honest with you, I really apologize to you. We've changed those windows many times, I don't know what.
I don't think we have any jurisdiction over it, but,
Yeah, it did,
we just want to.
it didn't matter to anybody, Mr. Humphries at that point, but he was just pointing out that it wasn't authentic metal or something.
Well, he's probably right about that. I wanted to put the building back just like it was on the front, but, what they tore off was really nice in the original edition. When they made that edition in '78 or whenever it was.
We can't
But, yeah, and then we're, P-TAC units under each window. Now, our hotel has heat pumps, and, that was really a change in the exterior of the whole building too. And it might have been one reason why the ones on the side are a little different, because they had to go all the way to the floor, the windows did, because of those openings that were in the wall. But we tried to just, we just put windows where there were windows. And made the signage clear so people would drive around the building or out the back of the alley.
So how about the recommendations from engineering? Have those been incorporated or those?
They have.
Yeah, okay.
Those are the two things the staff recommended, and that was gonna make a point to say a thing real quick to give us a site plan showing that they were going to add the landscaping and dedicated to match the Highland Genie across the street and the additional signage for directional purposes, entrance and exit.
So you're comfortable that's been taken care of?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I'll make a motion then that we just grant a certificate of appropriateness to First Community Bank.
Second that motion.
I'll second.
Any additional discussion? Have a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Wilson?
Aye.
Dr. White? Mr. Schuman? Mr. Sullivan?
Aye.
Mr. Elson?
Aye. All right, motion passed.
Okay,
Thank you very
all.
much, sir.
And sorry we missed the last meeting.
No
Thank you,
problem.
sir.
All right, next on our agenda tonight is the discussion topic of a comprehensive plan review and an update on that. Mr. Osborne.
Yes, sir, it's that time of year. 5 years are up on the last comp plan. And the code does stipulate a review and/or the option to update. And I know that there's been some concern amongst the board members that it may be time to do some update. Staff is recommending to do a sectional update and not a complete comprehensive update on the plan. And that is typically because we've got $17,000 allocated to start the process with an additional $17,000 next fiscal year. We do know that we would like to see some changes to the transportation plan and the future land use maps. But we're hoping that you all will give us some guidance on how you want us to handle it. This will be done, this will be an RFP. This will be a consulting firm. We'll hire a consulting firm to come in and do sectional updates.
I think last time we reviewed it section by section as they sent it in. Took a meeting and took a particular section and went through that.
Yes, sir.
All the way.
But we did that without using an outside vendor. And I think, I think it was well intentioned. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that the end product was as good as it might be. I tend to think we need to move with the RFP process and involve a consultant to do that. I just think a lot has changed, and particularly the discussion about how things need to develop probably needs to be part of the discussion. So I personally feel like that would be the way to go after, because again, we took a very long time the last time.
Yeah, a lot of these consulting firms now, specifically specialize on these types of issues, and I think it'd be a good idea to send out an RFP, do interviews, and bring it before you, and we make a selection on the company that we want to go with, and bring it before the commission.
I know we're sick and tired of seeing it on the agenda, weren't we? It was that long.
I remember what we did 10 years ago when we had, with the group out of Roanoke.
Yeah, the Hill Studios.
Yeah.
But they put together a very
Yeah.
professional.
Right. All right. Any other discussion in regards to that? All right, if not, under old business, first of all, we have the Hutton property. Update on that?
Well, I don't know if you've been by Miss Hutton's property, but you can tell she is complying with the notice of violation that we sent her. She's removed the tree, finally got the tree out of the front yard. She has replaced several sections of fascia and coming out of the so she is making an effort, and we're very pleased with that.
What about the sidewalk in the,
Mr.
Mr.
Bullock can talk
Bullock
about that.
can tell us about that.
Sorry.
I appreciate that. It's a good point. It's on our schedule this summer to go and do some sidewalk repair and paint and repair that handrail as we can. That's going to be, we've looked at it pretty hard. We think right now we're just in a case of just doing some repair. A few years down the road, we may want to come back and revisit that and do like a bigger project, the wall, everything. So I think that wall still has some life in it.
so you're saying that really is the town's, that's not something that she has to worry about, that's something that the town's gonna do?
I'm 99% sure that's the town right away.
The burden is on the property owner, so the burden would be on Miss Hutton to prove that it was.
Well, she alleged that the last time.
Right.
Yeah, she said it's hers.
Yeah, legal counsel advised us that
Yeah, all of a sudden.
it's ours to take care of.
There.
So, based on council's opinion, we're moving forward with taking our repairs.
Yeah, that's how that needs to be repaired. It's hopefully just maybe 6 to 8 weeks before we can get to it.
Well, if you want to really find out, then get an estimate of how much it costs repairing, and take it to her and say, whose property is this? We've got an estimate here, it's gonna cost $30,000 to repair this, and I guarantee you she'll come back very quickly. It's the town's.
Actually, if you're gonna do that, you need to take your colleague there with a $5.
All right. Yes, it does look good. It is much improved. There's no doubt about
We
that.
plan on staying on her about all of her properties.
Stay on it, she has a history of going for about a month and then stopping and picking it back up 5 years later, so just kinda.
We will stay on her, make sure that she
Now
complies.
she started 2 or 3 times repairing that porch and the fascia boards and stuff.
All right, the Kroger gas station, fuel center.
Last month, we updated and Had submitted the letter, had gotten a call from Mr. Fenton Childers. Mr. Fenton Childers proclaimed that he would speak with whoever was in charge to make sure that it didn't happen again. And that's about all I have on that.
It still hasn't responded to the letter.
They still have not. Kroger themselves, other than Mr. Childers, has not, and that's not who received the letter. We ended up resending the letter to Mr. Childers. But Mid-Atlantic has not responded.
To me, that's just not.
And I will tell you that it was not granted through a special use permit. It was a certificate of appropriateness. I do have those minutes pulled up from the past planning commission meetings. One was in December of 2012. The other, well, there were several, January, February of 2013, and then they went before the town council for the delivery to have they appealed the delivery schedules.
Appealed it to the council.
Yes, sir.
Help me understand. The COA, once that COA is issued, do we have a dog in this hunt?
It's not real clear. It's not clearly defined in the town code as far as time frame. The issue is once a CO is issued, who is the onus on? Is it on the planning department? Is it on the planning commission? Is it on the building official? Not real sure. Probably legal counsel take a look at it and see who has the authority to make those decisions.
And I've heard this discussion about 5 times, and I'm gonna tell you, as an outsider, I keep going, I don't see it. I don't understand what's the big deal. John Holbrook, how many crashes have we had? If you've got numbers, how many crashes have we had in front of the Kroger Fuel Center?
Within the last 5 years, we've had 4.
Can you tell me anything about them?
They were left turns from the parking lot on the Cumming Street for 3 of them, and the right turn from the parking lot on the Cumming Street for 1 of them.
Did any of them involve a fuel truck?
They did not. And also, it must be pointed out on that exit, it's shared with Shoney's, so you can't even tell where the person was coming from, whether they're coming from Shoney's or whether they're coming from the Fuel Center. So.
How far did you go back?
5 years.
It's only been there, how many?
5 years.
5.
5 years this past March.
Mr. Holbrook, how many crashes does it take with somebody hitting a fuel truck trying to turn left for it to be catastrophic? Only 1.
So
That's what the issue.
That's
the issue.
a statement. There's no accidents. It's ridiculous because you could stand here and say the same thing about St. Paul. Well, a truck's never run off the road into the creek and burst into flames before, but it did.
Yeah, no. I didn't come here to shoot and throw rocks. That's not why I'm here. I just think we got to be evidence-based on what we're doing, and we got to look at it from the evidence-based piece. And I know the best predictor of future behavior is what we've already dealt with. And I mean, anything can happen. I get that. Well, here's where I'm lost. I'm lost in where the planning commission, I'm looking for guidance. I'm looking for help. I'm lost in where the planning commission, where we go from here.
Well, when we did this, Kroger represented to us that, and there are 2 things, one of which is this and the other is the parking. And they represented to us that this is what they were going to do because that was our concern. Now, what we find is that they never intended to do what they said they would do. They never have done it. I agree with Wayne, and I've spent a lifetime handling industrial accidents, and I think that it's a situation which they obviously agreed could be a very dangerous situation, and they agreed to do it. The town agreed to the certificate of appropriateness, and then they went back and never did it. And their whole plan for this, the way it works is when they run out of fuel, there's a computer-generated request for a tanker truck to come to empty gasoline. They don't have a plan other than that.
Right, there's not a guy making
And
the
so,
phone call.
you know, in my way of thinking, the town did this, and again, to, you know, to lessen any possibility that there could be a catastrophic situation, and going back in time, many years ago, I think maybe the only people here might remember is Mr. Anderson and I, there was a catastrophic event, you know, in town with a fuel truck. So, you know, in my view is, I guess what bothers me the most is, we thought this out, we talked to Kroger's, we told them what we expected, and then they basically never intended to do what they said they would do, and they never have done what they said they would do.
I wanted, the motion was made, if I remember, I was the chairman, to, I believe it was, to approve it. A certificate of appropriateness.
With a change in how they park the cars.
Right,
and-
contingent upon the fact where how they park the cars and at certain hours, because I think the motion was gonna be defeated had they not agreed to these hours. I was opposed to those hours. I didn't think it was a big issue, because I think Bob Howard, who's on town council, brought up how many trucks come in and out of Kroger every day, and how many accidents that they cause. And so so the vote, I think I was the tiebreaker. As the chairman of the last vote, it was 3-2, but the representative of Kroger sat here and agreed to it. And that's the thing that now disturbs me, is that they agreed to these hours, and now they're not holding up to them, and they're not responding to them. So that's,
And they never have.
I think that's the issue.
Well, I guess my line of thinking is where do we go for redress? Here again, I'm trying to get up on all these codes, and I didn't see anything that allows us to do it.
The building official gives them a certificate of occupancy. So if there's some violation, there has to be, one would think there's fines, or there's some mechanism
See, I
if
can't-
you violate.
I have not been able to find where the two are connected, which is I alluded to this earlier. We got a lot of code problems, I think. We got a lot of problems with our ordinances. I never found where the two were connected.
Well, here's what I think we ought to do, and I'll just make this suggestion. I think whoever we're using for a town attorney, whether it's a vendor or we're gonna hire somebody, I'd like to have a legal opinion on this. Not only, you know, because again, I keep losing track, this is just me, but where they park the cars perpendicular to the right-hand side of Shoney's, to me, is an issue, because you're backing out right into the area where you turn from the gas and go, which creates a hazard. That was not part of the original plan. And then the fuel issue. And I think, you know, again, had that not been part of the certificate of appropriateness, had they not agreed to do it, and continually basically violated what they agreed to, I might feel differently. But I think we do need a legal opinion on both of those things, and I think we need to decide, you know, if we're going to accept that, because, you know, again, I understand what you're saying about a predictor, but you know, like I say, I've spent a lifetime dealing with industrial accidents, and I can tell you, whatever can go wrong does go wrong. And if people operated safely, I would have had no career.
Well, you know, and there's always Murphy that you got to account. He's going to show up whenever you.
And again, this is what, if you have an accident, I agree with Wayne, it's going to be a catastrophic accident. It's not going to be a small one in this situation.
Well, and I guess my point all along is, you know, I've heard us talking about this for 3 meetings, and I just don't like to chew the cabbage over. Where do you want to go? I think we just got some direction. I think
Yeah, I think this is a good idea.
I think we take this to legal counsel, let them look at it again, and then come back and say, here's where we can go, or wave the white flag, we can't go anywhere.
Right.
Well, and if
Do we
we have to
refer
wait
to
the
town
right,
council for action?
if we have to wave
Violation.
the right white flag, we don't need to sit here and worry with certificates of appropriateness and try to get people to do things. They can come in here and tell you anything, and then they can walk out and do whatever they want.
I think you're gonna find that it was granted on the specific understanding of the parking and the delivery times, and if they don't meet that the certificate of appropriateness can be revoked.
I think that's exactly right, and I think that Greg Kelly, who was then a member of the committee and the town manager, made the substitute motion, made it all contingent upon that, and I'm not sure the motion would have past, had it not had those contingencies in there.
Would it be the certificate of appropriateness that gets revoked, or would it be the CO? Could we pull their CO?
I don't think you can pull their CO.
I
It's
mean,
all
I'm just-
tied
I'm just-
together.
I'm just asking. 'cause
I think the certificate of appropriateness, but I haven't done the research on it.
But I do think we need to have that opinion, because I agree with Wayne, if we don't have that, then we have no teeth. And just, you know, as an aside, this is one of the few issues that Wayne and I have been in total agreement on over.
Well, it just seems like it never goes away, and I'm just trying to figure out how we can make it go away.
Well,
That's
you
where
know,
I
the
want to
thing
come
is,
from.
it should have gone away because they should have done what they promised to do. And I guess one of my big frustrations is, I can tell you, they never had any intention of doing this.
No. Yeah, I think the way it goes away is, number one, they respond to our letter and say, this is when we've delivered and these are the hours. We now recognize that that was outside what we told you, and this is how we have the plan lined up to where that doesn't happen any longer. We're gonna make a telephone call. We're not going to allow it to be computer generated any longer. And we're not gonna have a fuel tank on Cummings Street, truck on Cummings Street during the hours set out here.
You know, and again, I don't want to lose sight of those parking places, because to me, that's another accident waiting to happen, because the people leaving the restaurant, getting in those cars on the right side facing Shoney's that back up, again, they back up right into the area where somebody leaving the gas and go is going to be driving. And to me, now, you're not gonna have a catastrophic event like you would with a tanker truck, but I look at that and it just, again, it's an accident waiting to happen. It may not have happened yet, but it certainly seems to me that it's a dangerous situation. And I just don't see any reason I don't see any reason to ask for problems.
What, part of the problem also is whatever agreement was made with this body and Kroger's has to be given to the building official or whoever does the CO when they go out there and say, hey, wait a minute, this is what you agreed to. So
That's what the
there
code
may be
says.
a communication issue with that also.
Well,
Well, the code says that the building official is supposed to go out with the site plan that's been approved by the planning commission. And once he deems it
Yeah.
appropriate, per the certificate of appropriateness, then he issues a CO. That's what the code says.
And I'm totally with the chairman. I mean, I think, you know, if the commission passes motions and they're not followed, what's the point? So I'm looking for the redress. I'm trying to fix this, is what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, we
So-
want to find the teeth, we just don't
Yeah.
know within the current language of the way that our code is written, how we go about doing that.
And that gets back to the code issue. But anyway, so thank you. No,
Very good.
I don't want y'all to think I was throwing rocks. I wasn't trying to throw rocks. So I'm sorry if I came across that way. But we do have movement in a positive direction, I think.
Let's hope so.
Mr. Chairman, before we adjourn, one quick point. There was a discussion earlier about the empty storefronts in town and different things. And one thing I wanted to bring to the commission's attention is that the Economic Development Authority is doing some things that I think are going to hopefully address some of those issues. You know, I think we've talked about the facade improvement program. That program is going to be increased for other businesses. And the other thing that that the EDA is doing that hopefully will have a complete shortly is that we have gone out, members, and surveyed about a dozen different businesses in town, the larger businesses in town. We've done some significant interviewing to talk about what they see as ways to fill some of those sites, some of the ideas that they have. At least the draft of that will be discussed at the Economic Development Authority meeting on August the 16th. What the plan is to at least go approve that draft and then talk about next steps with the idea that sometime in September we would get that to the town council. And we've looked at different things, incentives and different things like that. I invite anybody to come to the August 16th meeting. But I did want people to know that that is something that's on the radar, that's something that the EDA is looking at, and that us, along with working with Tanya and Jane, that we're working on and hope to have soon. And what I will do is when we do have a final draft of that, I will bring that to the commission's attention.
And along that lines of what Mr. Sullivan said earlier about not wanting to be a roadblock, I think it's almost inherent in most governmental agencies, particularly at town and county levels, to be almost not knowingly, but against new businesses. Try opening a new business in this county or this town, and you get the immediate runaround. Nobody says thank you. Nobody says thank you for collecting my taxes for me. Nobody says thank you for hiring these people. They say you need to fill this form out before you do that. Or you need to do this. It's just inherent, but there's no. It's almost all governments become a roadblock to opening new businesses.
And again, one of the things we've tried to do with the Economic Development Authority is, prior to at least one time, we didn't have everybody in the same place at the same time. I think what we've done with Tanya, with Jane being there, now we have the lady from Main Street Abingdon is one of the people who shows up at all of our meetings and reports, and we're gonna now include, now that the Creeper Trail has an executive director and it's changed what they're doing, she'll be part of those meetings. So I think what we're trying to do is get all the interested parties in one room at one time to talk about some of those issues and try to resolve them. I think the other thing we're looking at in terms of what we were able to do with what we're doing now is to say we have a lot of the ability to do things that at some point in time we pay consultants to do, and sometimes we just need to get off and do it.
I would like to follow up. It used to be I heard people are speeding on my street, you don't do anything about it. The number one complaint I hear now is you don't know how difficult it is to open a business in this town. And,
Well, I had to go from opening disastrous, I had to go from this building down to the new police department, up to the county, back here, back there, back here, back there. And I never got anything. I remember one time I finally went up to the county and said, I'd like to fill out a form to open a new business. She says, okay, now I need to get you the right form. She spends 15 minutes to find this form. You said, well, wait a minute, there should be forms right there. I had here, if you open a new business. She finally hands me this form. I fill it out. Here's on the front for corporations. So I fill it out. A motion, hey, I'm through. She takes about another 5 minutes, comes back, looks at it, turns it over, throws it at me and says, you didn't fill out the back side. And I said, the back side says fill out for partnerships. I don't have a partnership.
Well, one of the things that
And walked off.
One of the things Tanya's working at is a one-page type of situation. I know she's working with you on that, is so that when somebody comes in, what they get is to say, okay, here's everything on one page, here's what you have to do. And I mean, I think, I hear what you're saying. I think, I think you would, if, again, talking to people like Tanya, I personally think she's doing a great job. And Jane and some of the folks working with Main Street Avenue, I think you've got a lot of people who, when you get them in one room at one time, will solve some of these problems. It's just getting them all there.
Or just having someone or some department say, thank you for opening this business. What can we do to make it easier for you? What can we walk with you?
I'll do that.
that issue that you identified is one that, and they'll tell you, when our first staff meeting, I said, we don't communicate. We have people show up at windows where there's nobody sitting, and they ring a buzzer and have to wait on someone to come up. We're not friendly to people who want to come pay taxes, much less people who want to open a business. And so we now have the windows manned all the time. We have smiling faces like this lady in the room who can direct you to the right person. Hopefully, we're trying to do one-stop shopping. You walk in, and we don't send you 16 places, and if we have to, we tell you exactly where to go in a good way. And let you go to the county, get your water permit or whatever you need. So we're trying to do some internal improvements, and I would love to hear anything in that direction that you think we need to do inside this building, because the opinions of the people that sit on this panel are very important to us in how we're streamlining this process.
All right, any other matters to come before the planning commission tonight? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you.
The conversation said,
Mr. Austin, would you please sign